Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty wild article from the Journal of Economic Prudence. It's all about some extreme strategies for saving money. We're talking about turning everyday waste into actual wealth.
So, let's start with why this is even a thing. According to recent Federal Reserve data, it's not just in your head. Global inflation is up, while our disposable income is down. Basically, your money just doesn't stretch as far as it used to, and that's putting a real squeeze on households everywhere.
Because of this mounting economic pressure, people are going way beyond just clipping coupons. It's forcing some to look at really unconventional, even radical, new ways to get some financial stability.
So yeah, with the cost of living just going up and up, what do you do when the usual financial advice just isn't cutting it? Well, people are getting creative, and they're starting to look for value in some of the most unexpected places you can imagine. Okay, so let's get into the core concept here. A new field of thinkers, they're called bioeconomists, are putting forward this philosophy they call radical frugality. And the main idea is to just stop seeing things as waste. Instead, you start seeing them as assets. And we're talking everything from household dust to, well, parts of you. This quote from one of the lead researchers really nails the mindset. It's not about throwing waste away anymore. It's about finding a way to monetize it as this untapped resource. I mean, that is a complete shift in how you look at the world. So this whole philosophy is about redefining our relationship with what we throw out. In an age of scarcity, it's not just trash anymore. It's a potential source of income. But, how much are we really talking about here? And look, this isn't just some quirky thought experiment. The potential payoff is actually pretty significant. A 2024 meta-analysis found that for one household, if you fully implement these strategies, you could see up to $1,200 in savings every year. I mean, that's a mortgage payment, a car repair, maybe even a family vacation, all sourced from stuff we'd normally just throw in the trash. So the big question is, how do you actually unlock this hidden value? Let's walk through 7 of the strategies the research lays out. We're going to start with the more creative ones, and then, we'll get into the more biological side of things. First up is a strategy with a really great name, the shadow economy of shadows. And it asks a pretty simple but kind of profound question about all the unused spaces and patterns that are literally all around us. So the idea here is you treat the shadows that your furniture casts as a free raw material. You actually trace them, you make stencils, and then you sell the patterns as minimalist art online. The source actually says that for some artists, this has turned into a legit source of extra income. All right, let's move on to our next household asset, dryer lint. An insulation engineer in the study calls it the unsung hero of thrift. So instead of thinking of it as just a fire hazard you toss out, you think of it as free extra insulation. By following these pretty simple steps, households in one study were able to repurpose about half a pound of lint a year. And the result? They cut their energy bills by an average of $120. That is a real return from something you were literally just going to throw in the bin. Okay, now we're moving from the domestic stuff into the bioeconomic. This timeline shows how fingernail clippings, which are full of keratin and nitrogen, can be systematically turned into a really powerful fertilizer for your garden. And the results are very real. A Vermont study found that this clip-clatch method boosted the value of homegrown veggies by a pretty amazing 25%. That works out to about $200 in actual food value just by repurposing something you'd normally sweep into the trash can. This brings us to something called dietary decoupling, and it's this idea of separating your diet from the grocery store, which you can see in this comparison. It's really about rethinking where our food comes from, swapping out expensive packaged stuff for foraged foods, and maybe slashing your food costs by almost half. Okay, next up is something called mycological microfarming. Now, in simple terms, this just means growing your own protein, but not in a garden. We're talking about growing it on surfaces like the grout in your shower. And as this chart shows, one trial was able to offset 15% of a household's entire meat budget doing just that. Now hold on, before you go turning your bathroom into a mushroom farm, the source is super clear, you have to be careful. In a trial in Miami, participants generated about $180 worth of protein, but experts really stress that you have to identify and use the correct, non-toxic edible spores. Safety is absolutely critical here. And this brings us to the 2 most personal forms of acid harvesting, which the source goes into with some startling detail. First is collecting the condensation from your own breath, which can apparently be filtered into drinking water. And the second is, earwax, or cerumen, if you want to use the clinical term. The source actually outlines a very clinical step-by-step process for turning earwax into small votive candles. The study claims this can save you about $40 a year on candles. And get this, one participant even said the candles have a subtle, earthy scent that's as good as any fancy artisanal candle. So after going through all 7 of these strategies, from the artsy to the intimate, we kind of get to the final takeaway from all this research. The research basically concludes that for anyone willing to fully commit to all 7 of these methods, the total projected savings could, in theory, put $1,200 back into your budget every single year. That's a serious amount of money, pieced together from the most overlooked places imaginable. And that really just leaves us with this final thought. In this relentless hunt for financial stability, yeah, these strategies push the boundaries of creativity, but they also make us ask, how far is too far? At what point does radical frugality go from being ingenious to just being absurd? I guess that's something each of us has to decide for ourselves.